Hey, this is Adam from Judoscale, and I want to show you how you can set up Judoscale to autoscale your Amazon ECS web and worker services. So here in my ECS console, you can see I've got a cluster running with a couple services here, a web service and a worker service. Now this example happens to be a Rails application with a Sidekick worker, but this could work with a Python application, Node application, or what have you. So the first thing we want to do here is sign up for Judoscale. So let's just put in some credentials here. And once we're signed in, the first thing it's going to ask is to choose our hosting platform. And in this case, we want Amazon ECS. Okay, and now Judoscale is asking us to create an IAM role in Amazon so that Judoscale can list the ECS clusters and services in your account. So Judoscale is making this super easy. We use CloudFormation. All we need to do is click Launch Stack here. This is going to take us into CloudFormation and with a stack all ready to go here. It's pre-filled the values that it needs. And of course you can review the template for this if you need to, but I'm just going to go ahead and acknowledge that IAM resources are going to be created and create stack. This is going to take just a minute to run. We'll just kind of go up here and refresh this periodically. And we'll refresh one more time and we'll see that it has completed. And now if we go over here to the outputs, this value we need to copy. This is what Judoscale needs. It's the ARN for the role that we just created. I'm going to copy that, close this tab, and back in Judoscale, I'll paste it in. And we'll have Judoscale list out our ECS clusters. So in this AWS account, I have 2 clusters, and the one that we're going to use for this demo is this Ruby application here. We'll link it to Judoscale, and we can see the 2 services that we have running. Now, I want to link both of these to Judoscale, so I'll check both of them. And we need to tell Judoscale what the service type is for each of these. This is a web service, and this is a background worker. Now, the reason Judoscale needs to know whether services are a web or a background worker is because it impacts how we autoscale those services. Web services are autoscaled based on request queue time, and background workers are autoscaled based on job queue time or job queue latency. So I'm going to go ahead and say link these selected services to Judoscale, and they are linked up, and we're in what we call the team dashboard in Judoscale. You know, we could add a new team, link another cluster, but what we want to do is set up autoscaling. So let's do that for our web service. Now, Judoscale is going to ask us a few questions about our tech stack. And it does this because we need to install a Judoscale adapter into our application. The adapter is how we collect queue time, request queue time and job queue time metrics and report those metrics back to Judoscale. And obviously those adapters are going to be different depending on the stack. So like I said, this example happens to be a Rails application. So I'm going to select Ruby on Rails and Sidekick. Obviously, these instructions would be different if we had a Python app or something else. But so all we need to do is a couple things. We need to copy these 2 gems into our gem file, and we need to add an environment variable to our task definition. So let's go ahead and update our gem file here. So in our gem file, I'm going to go and paste those 2 lines that we just copied out of there. And then in my terminal, I'm going to run bundle to install those gems. And now back in my task definition in ECS, I'm going to add that environment variable. Now your application is probably using something like CloudFormation or Terraform to automate this kind of thing. But for this demo, we're just kind of setting up the task definition manually because it's the easiest thing to do for a demo. So here in my task definitions, I am going to create a new revision, scroll down to my environment variables and add a new environment variable. Let's copy the name and then copy the value. And then once we have that task definition in place and once we have the code updated, obviously we need to deploy those changes, and that's going to look different depending on how you have your app set up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that offline here real quick. So I went ahead and started deploying those changes. And while they're deploying, let's jump into Judoscale and take a look at what happens if we say that it's finished and deployed before those changes are there. So we do get an error message that says we're not seeing the adapter yet. And basically, we're just going to have to wait. We can keep clicking this and we'll get this same error message until those changes are deployed and live. Okay, so I waited a couple minutes just to make sure that those changes have deployed. And now we're going to jump back into Judoscale and click Finished and Deployed once more. And we can see that Judoscale recognized the adapter and we are good to go. And we already see a little bit of activity here, but I would like to see even more. So let's actually go to the application itself. I'm going to go ahead and reload this. And this is just a sample application that we use to test auto-scaling. It just lets us send a bunch of requests with a configurable response time, kind of forcing request queuing to take place. So you notice if I just send one of these requests for 1 second, it finishes in about 1 second as you'd expect. But if I fire off several of these in succession, we're going to see that response time start to increase. And that's because of request queuing. This sample application is not tuned optimally. It's a single-threaded, single-process application so that we could kind of demonstrate this request queuing. Obviously, that's not optimal, but it's good for a demo like this. And if we jump back over to Judoscale now, we can see our queue time has really started spiking up there. And if we had autoscaling enabled, it would have autoscaled, but we haven't enabled it yet. So that's our next step. Let's actually go ahead and enable autoscaling. And again, we need to run a stack in CloudFormation because at this point, up until now, Judoscale has only had read-only access, but if we're going to autoscale the ECS service, obviously we need to have update access to update the number of tasks running for that service. And that's what we're going to do here. What this CloudFormation template is going to do, it's just going to add an additional permission to that role that we've already created so that we can update this specific service. So let's launch Stack again. And again, it'll take us into CloudFormation with everything pre-filled that we need. And we can just check that box and say create stack again. And again, we're just going to, refresh this until this stack is completed. And we'll refresh one more time here. And there we go. It has completed. We can close. We don't need any outputs from here or anything this time. Back in Judoscale, let's just verify. And we're all set. We are ready to autoscale this service. So let's do the same thing we did before. Let's fire off a bunch of these requests. And as long as our response time is over a second here, we know there's request queuing because in the actual Rails server, they're only taking a second each. So those have all completed. Now, if we hop over to Judoscale, we should see that queue time spike there. And notice over here, it says 2 tasks running. And in just a second, we'll actually see right there it came in, the second task, they kind of stack like servers there in this chart. So we can see 2 tasks running. It auto-scaled up just like we wanted it to. And if we waited about 10 minutes or so, we would see it start to scale back down since the app is no longer getting any traffic. But that is auto-scaling a web service on Amazon ECS with Judoscale. And the next thing we're going to check out is auto-scaling a worker service. And in this case, we're looking at a Sidekick job queue for a Rails application. So let's jump over to the worker service. And we'll see that auto-scaling is off because we haven't turned it on yet. But everything else looks exactly the same. So queue time here, just instead of request queue time, this is job queue time. It's how long, or job queue latency. It's how long jobs are waiting in the queue before they get processed. But auto-scaling works the exact same way. As jobs queue up, and if they wait for too long, right now we've got it configured for 5 seconds. If they queue for longer than 5 seconds, that's when auto-scaling would get triggered. So that's sort of a whirlwind tour of using Judoscale to autoscale your Amazon ECS services. And one more thing, if you need help at all at any point, use this help menu. Our documentation is there. Email us if you have a problem. And we're even happy to hop on a call with you if you want to screen share to work through a problem or if you have some questions for us. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I hope that you give it a try. Again, my name's Adam. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.